Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our SHEroes event today. We're very excited to have you all here with us. And looking forward to having a conversation today about this important topic, reducing fraud through proactive prevention. I see there's still some people joining, so before we get into the details of the session, just a few reminders. You can use the chat box for any comments or questions as we go along. Please remember that there's also CPD points to be allocated, and for you to be eligible to that, you should participate in the polls throughout the session and stay participative throughout our session. And then those CPD certificates will be emailed out later in the week. So we hope you will enjoy the session with us. And looking forward to also at the end of the session have a bit more of a conversation. Very, very welcome to everyone. On the next page, Sanmarie. If you stand for nothing, you will fall for anything. This statement from Thuli Madonsela speaks to something fundamental about ethics. We need to know what we stand for, because when principles are unclear, they become much easier to compromise. And when integrity becomes negotiable, the space for unethical behavior, including fraud, becomes much easier to create. This statement is particularly fitting for the conversation we're having today about reducing fraud through proactive prevention. Because preventing fraud is about more than detecting misconduct after it happened. It starts with what we stand for as individuals and organizations, our values, our culture, the questions we prepare to ask, and the actions we are prepared to take when something doesn't look right. As internal auditors, we've got a huge obligation to ask the questions and to be the voice of reason. Madonsela also said she was quite outspoken about the fact that we should have a vision that acts as a compass for our day-to-day decisions. And being prepared to be the voice of reason for our organizations. As internal auditors, we engage with multiple stakeholders. As risk professionals, we have an obligation to challenge behavior and to stand up for principles. The idea of having the courage to stand on principle was also explored in our article that we published earlier in the month, From the Union Buildings to the Boardroom. You can find the article on our LinkedIn page. The link is in the chat. Every August, we stand still and we remember the women who marched to the Union Buildings in 1956. Yes, 70 years ago. Those women stood together on principle, because they believed that an unjust system could not simply continue. There's a powerful parallel between the history and our workplace of today. The article that we wrote makes some of those points clearer. It talks about integrity, it talks about honesty and consistently. But it also talks about organizations that need to create environments where people can raise their concerns, challenge what doesn't work and what doesn't look right, even when it takes some personal courage and potentially personal cost. That matters enormously when we talk about fraud prevention, because proactive prevention isn't simply about putting more controls in place, improving the ability to detect fraud. It starts with values, it starts with principles that shape decisions that before fraud even occurs. It starts with that environment that we create for people to operate in. What we stand for, what happens when we live our principles, influence organizations, and do our people feel empowered to then speak up in these environments that we create. So as we celebrate Women's Month, it's fitting for us to pause and reflect on those powerful statements of Thuli Madonsela, where she regularly demonstrated the importance of integrity, accountability, and the courage to challenge wrongdoing. And today, we're going beyond detection. We're looking for practical ways of how we can prevent fraud and what preventative measures we can put into place to make it harder for fraud to take place in our environment. So on this topic, we're going to explore quite a number of sub-elements. On the agenda, you'll see we've got two speakers that's going to join me, which I will introduce shortly. We're going to talk about why fraud prevention is important. We're also going to share some data insights and some frankly shocking statistics about fraud. We're going to unmask the root causes of fraud and the triggers that drive fraud. And then we will talk about fraud prevention in a practical manner and what you can implement in your environments. Point 6 is particularly close to my heart, which is where we will talk about ethical culture. And then last but not least, we will bring it together on an integrated approach. And then as we close off the session, we will have some knowledge exchange, which we will summarize what we've learned and heard today. Let me introduce you to our speakers. Let me start with myself. Some of you already know me, Ria Pretorius. I'm a director at SHEroes Beyond Thornton. I'm here now for over 4.5 years. Previously worked at one of the big 4 firms, also as a director. I'm heading up our Business Risk Services division, which include internal audit, risk management services, program assurance, compliance, and all sorts of other services, including which I am very passionate about, is actually fraud prevention and how we make organizations better. For me, fraud prevention is that area where we improving culture, we enhancing whistleblowing processes, and where we really make organizations better for the long run. With me today, we've got Sunmarie Storm. Sunmarie is a senior manager in our firm, and she's been with us for a couple of years now. Her career span over 12 years, being a certified fraud examiner as well as ethics officer. And she, one of the highlights of her career was actually being seconded to the Zondo Commission. More recently, Sunmarie has started to work with organizations in the fraud prevention space, helping them to foster cultures for fraud prevention, strengthening whistleblowing processes, and really help organizations to maximize the value of the individuals on how they can strengthen the control environment to prevent fraud. We're looking forward to all the insights, Sunmarie, that you're going to share with us. And then our other speaker is Gert Venter, an Associate Director with SHEroes Beyond Thornton, an experienced investigator, forensic accountant, and he has ventured into risk advisory and broader advisory work where he advises clients on strengthening internal control environments, and then also how that can prevent fraud. So we're also looking forward to some of the insights and practical tips Gert is going to share with us. Right, so I think let's get warmed up with a polling question. So you can launch the polls, and let's see, we will give you the right answer as well, but I'm very curious to know what will be your response to this polling question. Where is our polling question now? It disappeared. Maybe you can just help me there. Wani, where's our polling questions? Oh, it looks like we've got some glitch. Anyway, we will sort that out, but let's get into the rest of the agenda. I'm sure we will get the other polling questions up shortly. Gert, I think it's over to you to start us off with the first question. But before you start, I would really just like to encourage everyone to put their comments, thoughts in the chat. We're happy to respond to that, and we will certainly like to hear from you, your thoughts and views on fraud prevention and how fraud prevention is taking place in your organization, if it is, or any tips or tricks that we can share with each other. So please feel free to do that. Righto, Gert, over to you.
Thank you, Ria. I want to start with a question, not a rhetorical one, a genuine one. In your organization, how much time, budget, and attention is spent on investigating fraud after it has happened, compared to preventing it in the first place? Most organizations I work with are weighted more towards the reactive end, the investigation, the disciplinary process, the audit that happens after the loss already is on the books. And I understand why. The investigations are tangible. You can point to them. Prevention is quieter, but the data makes the case very clearly. If you look at the next slides, in terms of the most comprehensive global fraud study available for us is the 2026 report to the nations by the ACFE. And this tells us that organizations lose an estimated 5% of annual revenue to fraud every single year. A test from the latest report across 2,402 cases studied this year alone topped the losses to a total of $3.4 billion. Projected globally, that translates to more than about 5.5 trillion USD lost to occupational fraud annually. 5.5 trillion. Now, if you get back to the 5%, this is not an outlier year. It's not this year alone. It's a consistent estimate, year after year, across every sector, every geography, every organizational size. The typical fraud case this year ran for 12 months before it was caught. 12 months of losses accumulating. 12 months of a control environment that was not doing what it's supposed to do. By the time the fraud was detected or is detected, the financial damage is done. So is the reputational damage, the damage to your culture, the trust that holds the team together. In the next slide, if you look at the South African context, and I say this to recognize that we've got many people in the room or in the webinar today that operate in complex and high-pressure environments. Our AG, or Auditor General, identified 266 material irregularities involving non-compliance, suspected fraud in national as well as in provincial government. And it's between the 2018-19 years until 2022-2023. That's an estimated 14.3 billion in financial losses. The shocking part for me is only 8% of those losses has been recovered. So, although these figures are significant, the purpose of referencing to them today is not to single out any institution, it's to show why prevention, early detection, and a stronger system design matter at the national level. The broader point is the cost of fraud is never only financial. It affects your public trust, your governance confidence, your service delivery, your organizational culture. And that is why the conversation has to move beyond the blame and more towards a practical prevention. Asking what can be strengthened before the losses occur, rather than only responding after the fact. Prevention is not just cheaper than detection, it's the only approach that actually addresses the risk before the damage is done. Before I hand over, I want to invite you to please add any questions, reflections in the chat box. And this may relate to the cost of fraud, why prevention matters, or how the South African context compares to what you are seeing in your organization. We will pick this up during our questions and answers or during our knowledge sharing or knowledge exchange at the end.
Thank you, Gert. So yeah, as you said, the ACFE report to the nations is published every 2 years, and it really draws on thousands of actual fraud cases that's investigated by certified fraud examiners around the world. And it's the closest thing that our profession has to really a ground level data set of how fraud really happens. So let us look at what the data tells us. Let's start with scale. So the ACFE data tells us that the median loss per case this year is $104,000, and the average is $1.4 million. And when we look at government and public administration specifically, the median sits at $100,000 per case. Now, these are not abstract numbers. That is a budget line. It's a program, or it's a team's annual capacity, gone and lost due to fraud. Now, this slide gives us the main evidence themes that we will unpack through the ACFE graphs. We will see and look at how fraud is detected, how the duration affects loss, which controls are associated with lower losses and faster detection, and ultimately why awareness and a combined control approach really matter. So rather than treating these as separate statistics, think of them as connected evidence that all support the same conclusion. And that is that prevention pays because time, controls, culture, and reporting all affect the final loss. Now, this section is really data heavy. And as we move into the graphs, I really don't want us to get lost in every bar or every percentage. But the important pattern here is this. Organizations with a stronger anti-fraud control system generally experience lower losses and shorter fraud duration. And that's the practical value of these graphs. They show that prevention is not just good governance language. It has a measurable relationship with financial outcomes at the end of the day. Now, this first graph is a useful reminder that fraud detection is still heavily dependent on people being willing to speak up. Tip-offs remain the leading detection method, accounting for about 43% of occupational fraud detections. And about 55% of those tip-offs come from employees. What's also interesting is how people report. So email and web-based reporting channels now feature strongly alongside the more traditional telephone hotlines. And so the practical question is not only whether an organization has a hotline, but whether it has trusted, accessible reporting channels that employees or vendors and customers actually feel able to use. In the next graph, we focus on the controls with the strongest impact. Now, these are surprise audits, management review, and proactive data monitoring and analysis. These specific controls are linked to materially lower losses and faster detection times. And the common thread is active oversight, which means somewhere, someone is reviewing, someone is testing, someone is challenging, or someone is analyzing before the issue grows unchecked. The next two graphs makes the same point but from two different angles. First is the presence of an anti-fraud control system is associated with lower median losses. And in addition to what we showed on the previous slide, these anti-fraud controls also include fraud risk assessments, an implemented code of conduct, and also other controls. Now on the next slide, we see that the presence of anti-fraud controls is also associated with shorter fraud duration. And that matters because the duration is one of the biggest cost drivers. Simply, the longer a fraud runs, the more difficult and costly it becomes to contain, to investigate, and ultimately to recover. In closing out on the data, the next two slides really bring the detection story back to people. And this is the important part for me. The key message is that fraud awareness training is strongly linked to whether employees submit tip-offs that lead to the detection. Employees who had received training were much more likely to report concerns than those who had not. And the practical point of that is that training doesn't just inform the employees, it activates them as part of the organization's early warning system when we focus on fraud. And the message becomes even more practical on this slide. And that is that effective awareness training helps employees recognize the warning signs. It helps them to understand what to do with their concerns, and it also helps them to feel confident in using those reporting channels that's available to them. And in that sense, awareness training strengthens the human side of the control environment, and it helps turn a reporting mechanism into something that people can actually use and understand and feel comfortable to use. Now, the same pattern holds domestically. And that is that unfair, uncompetitive procurement and payments for goods and services never received are consistently the single largest drivers of material irregularities identified by South Africa's Auditor General. And the practical message is that prevention must focus not only on detection after the fact, but on procurement governance, independent review and documentation, and then the early challenge before the losses actually materialize. And underreporting remains a challenge in South Africa. While the Protected Disclosures Act provides important protections for whistleblowers, questions have been raised about whether current reporting mechanisms do enough to really encourage people to come forward without the fear of retaliation. And from a preventative perspective, organizations therefore need to think carefully about how they create that trusted, accessible reporting channel environment that employees feel safe to use and actually raise concerns early. Now, before I hand over, I just want to ask everyone to please add any questions in the chat, whether it's ACFE data or detection methods, whistleblowing channels, or asking how these statistics apply in your own organizations. And then we will come back to them during the knowledge exchange session.
Thank you, Summary. When an investigation concludes and we sit down to write the findings, there's always this moment when the question comes up: why did it happen? The answer that we give is enormous because the answer shapes what gets fixed. So the most common answers I see in investigation reports are things like insufficient oversight, non-compliance with policy, lack of segregation of duties. And those answers are not wrong, but they are symptoms. They describe what was absent. They do not explain why it was absent. They do not tell you what to change and that it does not happen again. So if we go to the next slide, the framework that helps us to go deeper is one that most of you would have encountered, the fraud triangle. It has our three elements: pressure, where the fraudster had a reason to act; financial stress; performance targets that could not be met legitimately; personal circumstances. Pressure does not justify the fraud, but it's the trigger. And this is what moves someone from passive compliance to active misconduct. Opportunity. The control environment made it possible. So the weak segregation of duties, the poor oversight, the manager who signs off without reviewing, the IT system that did not log the access. Opportunity is the leg of the triangle that prevention programs have the most direct ability to address. Rationalization. If you look at how the fraudster found a way to tell themselves it was acceptable. I'm just borrowing at it. Everybody does this. Or the organization owes me. The rationalization is the bridge between the temptation and the action. And this is the leg that most prevention programs almost entirely ignore. The key insight here that I want to share with you is if your prevention program only addresses opportunity, you only tighten the control, you've only addressed 1/3 of the triangle, right? You have not touched the conditions that create the pressure. You have not addressed the culture or the ethical environment that either discourage or enables rationalization. On the next slide, I want to utilize the data that the ACFE gives us a little bit more of a breakdown of these root causes. And I think it's worth sitting to understand that 33% of all fraud cases trace back simply to the lack of internal controls. Not broken controls, not overridden controls, not no controls at all. Just override of existing controls accounts for another 19%. The lack of management review, another 18%. Together, those three account for 70% of all cases. When I read that, the question I ask is not what control was missing. The question is, why was it missing? Was it never designed? Was it designed but never resourced? Was it overridden by someone in authority? Or was it there on paper, but nobody was checking whether it actually worked? So those are very different problems with very different solutions. But if the investigation report tells you lack of controls, and the remediation plan basically say implement controls without asking those deeper questions, the incident may be closed on paper, but the risk is still open. So there's a practical test that I use. And I say if the fraud risk register has not been updated after a significant incident, the incident's not truly been closed. So the risk register is your organization's live record of what you know about where your exposures are. So an investigation that does not feed back into that register has left the job half done. From the Zondo Commission, they found that weak oversight and ineffective controls were leading systematic enablers of our state capture nationally. That point connects directly to the root cause data from the ACFE. The issue is rarely only whether a control exists on paper, but whether oversight is sufficiently independent, consistently applied, and supported by the right governance structures. The same point applies to the speak-up culture. So the Zondo Commission also highlighted the personal consequences faced by whistleblowers, including intimidation, dismissal, financial harm, and in some extreme cases, even assassinations, where employees were uncertain whether raising concerns will be welcomed, investigated fairly, or kept confidential. Reporting can be delayed or suppressed. And that is why the culture is not a soft issue in fraud prevention. It directly affects whether the concerns surface early enough for management to act. Before we move on, please add any questions, any comments in the chat box on the fraud triangle, root causes, the speak-up culture, or even the challenges of moving from investigation findings to practical remediation, because these are often the issues that look simple on paper, but becomes more complex in practice.
That's very true. Thank you, Gert. All right, so now we've looked at why fraud matters and also what tends to drive it. We've looked at the ACFE statistics and we understand how that environment practically can look like. But now we need to go to the next level. And now that practical question is, what actually reduces the risk? And I think the key point in this topic is that effective prevention is not just a single control or a once-off exercise. It's really the combined effect of practical controls and active oversight, as well as ethical behavior and a follow-through culture. The ACFE data gives us useful evidence that it shows because controls are associated with lower losses and faster detection across real fraud cases. That's how you, at the end of the day, can prevent fraud in practice. Now, let me walk you through the controls on the slide, but I want to add a lens that you need to keep in mind, and that is that each control must either reduce the opportunity, it must increase the visibility, or it must strengthen the accountability. Starting with the first one is hotlines and whistleblowing mechanisms. Now, tip-offs remain the leading way that fraud is detected, but the mechanism only really works if people know how to use it and they believe concerns will be handled properly. So the practical focus is the usability, the confidentiality, and the follow-through, and not just simply the fact that a hotline exists. The second is surprise audits. Now, these have a strong deterrent effect, particularly when the policy is that they happen regularly and without advance notice. And the deterrent value is as important as the detection value. Thirdly, we have fraud risk assessments. Now, this is where the prevention becomes targeted. A good assessment identifies the processes, the roles, and the transactions where the organization is most exposed to, so that the controls and the monitoring efforts are focused where they matter most. And it should be updated as risks, incidents, and business processes change on an ongoing basis and in a live environment. Then anti-fraud policy and training. Now, the policy sets that expectation, but the training component helps people actually apply it. The most useful training is practical and scenario-based. What does a red flag look like in your environment, in your department? What should I do with it? And what decisions should I make under pressure? It's not simply just a 30-minute video with a quiz at the end. We also have internal audit. Now, internal audit helps to close that gap between the control design and the control operation. It also gives that independent assurance that the controls are not only documented, but that they're actually working as it was intended. We also have management review and oversight. Now, this is about active challenge. Not just signing off a report, but really asking whether the numbers make sense, whether exceptions have been followed up, and whether recurring issues are being escalated, whether we have support for those exceptions, for example. Then segregation of duties. Now this is the classic preventative control. It reduces the number of situations where one person can initiate and approve and execute a transaction without any independent involvement. And this directly removes that opportunity leg from the fraud triangle. And lastly, the code of conduct, but with an annual acknowledgement. This should be more than an administrative exercise. It's a recurring opportunity to reaffirm expectations and remind employees that ethical responsibility applies to their day-to-day decisions. This is not merely just a paper exercise and a data gathering exercise. It needs to be made practical on a day-to-day basis. I want to also give you a practical example, taking all of this into context. In procurement, prevention is strongest when the controls work as a chain. So for example, the declarations of interest before the evaluation, the vendor master data checks throughout, and then the documented bid committee challenge. And on top of that, the segregation of duties in approvals and also looking at the post-award contract monitoring. So the value is not in any one single of those controls on its own, but the way that they create that visibility and accountability and transparency across the process. Now, the next slide really shows us that these controls do not operate independently, and they work best when they are organized into a simple prevention framework. The 5 pillars help us to see whether the program is balanced or whether too much reliance is being placed on one specific area. I want to start off with governance. Now, governance is the foundation. That is the board oversight. It's the tone at the top. It's your fraud risk policy. It's your committee accountability and clear ownership. And without this governance foundation, the rest of the program really has no authority behind it. Now we start building the pillars. The first one we look at here is risk assessment. This tells the organization where to focus the efforts. It should be structured, repeated regularly and updated when the risk indicators change. It should not be treated as a static document that's produced once a year. We also look at controls, both preventative, so those that stop the fraud before it occurs, but also your detective controls, those that identify when it actually happens. And you need both in your organization. And then we look at culture and ethics. Now, this is what makes the controls credible. That's the training, the declarations, the leadership behavior, and consequence management that influence whether employees take the fraud prevention program seriously. But we will unpack that in the full topic in topic 5. And then lastly, we also have reporting and response. And that's really looking at effective whistleblowing channels, investigation protocols, and a post-incident remediation. So ultimately, that loop has to close. There is that life cycle. I want to give you another practical example. And a simple way to use this 5-pillar framework is to pick one high-risk process in your organization. For example, procurement or payroll or expense claims or a vendor onboarding department, and to test the process against each of these pillars. So then, for example, looking at who oversees it, when was the risk last assessed, what controls are in place, how are ethical concerns escalated, and what happens if something actually goes wrong. And that then turns this framework into a practical review tool that closes the loop ultimately. On this slide, I really want to bring the previous points together and move from framework to a practical action perspective. Now, we've already spoken about risk assessments. We've spoken about controls, reporting mechanisms, oversight, as well as culture. So the question is not how do we build a perfect fraud prevention program overnight? I think the better question here is this: what can we start doing now that is simple, practical, and visible? And this is where I encourage you to maybe take out your pen and paper and just make a few practical notes of how this can be applied in your organization. Now, the examples on the slides are useful starting points. The fraud risk register is still important, but at this stage, the point is not to repeat that it exists. We've unpacked that before. It's now to make sure that it is structured properly, it's owned by the right people, and it's updated often enough to remain useful and relevant for that specific department. Then we move into the routines. So it's the routines that make that emerging issues easier to see. It's using data analytics to identify anomalies that manual review might miss. It's maintaining a gift register or a hospitality register that's actually reviewed. Again, not just a data gathering exercise. It's conducting pre-employment screening and refreshing declarations of interest on an ongoing and continuous basis. And then also using a mandatory leave or job rotation in specific roles where a long tenure or concentrated access can create a risk in your environment. And what these examples have in common is that they are not necessarily expensive or complicated, but their value is that they can create that rhythm and visibility and the transparency for many stakeholders that's looking at this process and where they're dependent on looking at fraud and fraud prevention at the end of the day. And they then help management see the patterns easier, they help ask the better questions, and also connect what's been identified in the risk assessment to what's actually being monitored on a day-to-day basis within the operations. So the practical takeaway is this. Choose the routines that speak to your highest risk areas. Then assign ownership and make sure that someone reviews the results and follows up. In other words, that it's actively monitored. And that's how the framework then starts to become real. Not through a long list of controls, but through a few disciplined practices that are repeated consistently. So in the South African context, a practical local example is procurement governance, one of the higher risk areas we almost always see in most organizations. So in some supply chain management environments, approval authority may sit with a limited number of officials to support efficiency and quicker decision making, which from a business perspective, there is a point, but the Auditor General has repeatedly highlighted that where insufficient independent review or challenge is built into the process, this can then increase the risk of unfair and uncompetitive procurement outcomes. So at the end of the day, the lesson here is constructive. Efficiency and control are not competing objectives. A well-designed process should help legitimate work move faster, but while still preserving the review, challenge, and the transparency at the points where the risk is the highest. And that is the balance that fraud prevention should aim for. Practical, risk-based, and proportionate. But before I hand over to Ria, please a reminder to add any practical questions. These might relate to implementing fraud prevention controls, to using data analytics, keeping the risk assessments current, or even just balancing the efficient procurement with the need for independent review and the challenge.
Sanne-Marie, this was so interesting. Before we get into this specific question, I wanted to just mention that we've got quite a lot of comments in our chat in respect of how these points has resonated with them, particularly around that prevention is certainly the way to go if we look at how much is spent on fraud, and that there will definitely be a lot of benefit for organizations for just spending that bit of effort on the prevention side. So I'm quite curious to hear some of our comments when our audience see how we close the loop right at the end, Gert, because that will just come together so logically. The other one that was quite interesting, which I would like to explore in our quick Q&A session, is the one around access controls. So Surety, if it is okay with you, when we get to the end of the session, we would like you to just, we will unmute you, and then maybe we can discuss the point you raised around access controls. because access controls could be a very powerful control that could actually prevent fraud and make a huge difference in this fraud prevention culture. So just a heads up on that one, that we're going to ask you to speak up. And then one of the other points that Cindy also made was around the bypass of approvals and segregation of duties. It's such a common factor, right? We see it, unfortunately, in so many organizations. And it's maybe another topic we can explore under general. Why is it so difficult for organizations to practically implement that and keep it and maintain it? Because it's, as internal auditors and risk professionals, it's kind of a common sense one for us. But why is it so difficult for organizations to just consistently implement that? And then I think it gets us to almost our polling question. And I saw Victor also posted a very, very important comment here around how organizational leaders do not prioritize anti-fraud measures. And Victor, unfortunately, in the role that I play in our organization, I interact with lots and lots of clients across public sector, private sector, and so forth. And the conversations stop at the fraud investigation. And the moment one asks, so what? What are we going to do differently? How do we bring the lessons learned back? There's silence in the boardroom, right? And that for me is where we sit with an unbelievable opportunity to make our businesses better, is to focus on fraud prevention. I see some of our colleagues has already answered on the polling question. In the spirit of Women's Month, let's see the fact check. What percentage of occupational fraud perpetrators globally are women? Let's see, what is the result? What is the result on this one? Kulwani, where do I see the result? Maybe one of you can just tell me what is the correct answer. And most people respond 28%. So 57% of the audience has responded 28%. And then it varied. 52% of the audience said 9%. Sanmarie, you will tell me the right answer is 28%.
Yeah, that would be 28%. That's right.
28% of women are actually in this globally. Yeah, so it was quite a startling statistic for me. I was kind of thinking you would probably find a kind of 50-50 split or maybe 60-40. I didn't actually expect it to be so vastly towards men. I would not venture my opinion on that. I think on this point, let's carry on. This was a good break from what we were talking about, but let's get into the culture one. Sanmarie, thank you.
Thank you, Ria. And also Victor for your comment. That really leads us into this section. And it's one of those that I'm truly passionate about because it brings that fraud prevention into a practical level in an organization. And that's looking at your people and how your people can better support the organization towards a improved fraud prevention culture. So, I want to start this section with a statement that I know it sounds simple, but it is actually quite profound, and I want to unpack it. So, culture is not what you write down. Culture is what you do. And it's the sum of what your organization rewards, what it tolerates, and what it punishes. And that then is shaped much more powerfully by the behavior of leaders than by the content of any policy document. And I like to refer back to the ACFE data because it makes this point very concrete. A poor tone at the top is the third most common root cause behind frauds committed by owners and by executives. And that's not simply a control failure. That points to a leadership environment where misconduct can be rationalized, ignored, or allowed to continue. And remember, employees take cues from what leaders do in practice. For example, if a senior leader bypasses a procurement requirement, or they accept an inappropriate gift, or signs off without a proper review, and nothing happens, then the message to them is clear. The rules are flexible when the person is senior enough, and also that selective rules are not controls. We must remember that. And that's why consequence management is such a useful test of an ethical culture. It shows whether an organization applies its standards consistently when the pressure is real. When owners and executives commit fraud, they are terminated in only 52% of cases. Now compare that to employees and managers at 75%. And for owner and executive perpetrators, 12% of them face no punishment at all, compared to just only 2% of employees and managers. Now, that disparity sends a powerful signal. If employees believe that accountability applies more firmly to staff than to their senior leaders, the control environment that you've worked hard to implement and also costly to make sure that it's implemented throughout, it then loses its credibility. People may still know the rules, but they are less likely to believe that the system is fair. So the test is not only whether consequences exist in policy, but whether they are timely, proportionate, and applied regardless of seniority. And that is what turns ethics from an expectation into a behavioral standard that can mean a lot more in your organization. Now, what does embedding an ethical culture look like in practice? It's not about adding more policies. It's about building ethics into the ordinary routines of the organization. Now, we've referred to many of these, but I want to really now unpack these on a practical level on how it can look like in your organization. And the first one is looking at ethics training that is scenario-based. Now, this means training that actually helps people to practice decisions under pressure. Not just, as I referred to earlier, a compliance tick box exercise like a training video with a short quiz at the end. This is to make it practical and relevant to where that individual sits in the organization. And the aim is to help build that judgment so that when a real dilemma arises, the employee already have worked through how to respond. They've seen that practical example and they know what to do next. We also have declarations of interest that should be monitored and actioned. And the value is not in collecting declarations. It's really in what happens next. What do you do with those declarations? So when a conflict is then identified, there must be a clear response, a consistent treatment, and evidence that the risk was actively managed. It's also having an ethics help desk. Now, this gives that employee a place to ask for guidance before an issue becomes a formal report. In many cases, the question is not yet, I want to report misconduct. It's, I'm not sure whether what I'm seeing is appropriate. And then reaching out to someone that can help guide you. And that early guidance can then prevent issues from actually arising and from escalating. And the next one is looking at ethics champions at a divisional level. Now, these create the link between the ethics function and an operational function in reality. And they, being the ethics champions, help ensure that ethics is not seen as something that's distant from a day-to-day working environment, but it's something that's understood and that's reinforced where the decisions are actually made on the ground and in practice. And also having a social and ethics committee where it's applicable. This gives ethics a formal governance home, but at board level. It's a committee that should not only receive reports, but also ask whether the ethics program is working in practice, whether the training is happening, whether conflicts are being managed, whether themes are being escalated, and also culture risks and whether that's visible to leadership. And the last one here is integrating ethics into performance management. Now, this is where it matters most. This is where the culture becomes operational and not optional. So if a KPI reward the decisions and promotes focus only on results without considering how those results were achieved, the reward system will shape the behavior more strongly than an ethics policy. I want to make it practical. An ethics program becomes more real when employees see it in their everyday decisions. Managers declaring conflicts before the meeting, or leaders refusing inappropriate gifts, or procurement teams documenting why a bidder was excluded, and executives reinforcing the accountability in a way that protects the confidentiality but still demonstrates fairness in the process. These visible behaviors show employees that ethics is not part of how the work is done. It shows that it's part of how the work is done, but not just a separate compliance activity. It's embedded in the organization, in the decision-making process, in simply what they do every single day. And the common thread is that each mechanism, we've unpacked that, must create that real behavior component. So it's not just a record at the end of the day. It's part of how the employees think. It's part of how the business runs. And the training component should help them improve their judgment. Declarations should lead to actions, and the help desks should provide the guidance that's missing. Committees should challenge whether the programs are actually working. And at the end of the day, that's the loop. That's how culture becomes embedded in your organization. Now, in the South African context, whistleblower protection is also evolving. It's a very relevant time at the moment. The current Protected Disclosures Act provides important protection, but it doesn't create specific criminal offence carrying a prison sentence for retaliation against the whistleblower. The draft Protected Disclosures Bill of 2026 is therefore significant because it proposes a stronger measure in that regard, and it includes criminal sanctions of up to 15 years imprisonment for retaliation. But the legislation can only set the standard. Inside the organization, the real test is whether people believe the standard and they believe that it will be honored in practice. And that belief is built through leadership behavior, through consistent follow-through, and visible assurance that concerns are handled fairly, confidentially, and without retaliation. Before we move to the next and the final section, please add any questions or reflections in the chat on ethical culture maybe, or tone at the top, even consequence management, or maybe how organizations can make whistleblower protection real in a day-to-day experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. Everything we've covered today, the data, the root causes, the controls, culture that somebody gave us such beautiful practical examples about, this needs to fit into a coherent system. It's not a linear sequence that you move through once and it's considered done. It's a continuous loop. If you go on to the next slide, the diagram that you'll see on the screen here shows the 5 stages. Prevention, detection, investigation, response, and assurance. And the reason it's drawn as a circle is deliberate. The loop does not end. Each stage needs the next, and the assurance feeds back into prevention. So if you take a forensic investigation, it's a necessary response to fraud, but it closes the incident. It does not by itself close the risk. So if you look at the ACFE data, it makes this stark. 80% of the organizations that update their controls after fraud is discovered. But the median loss for those who were forced to update because of the fraud already occurred was around 120,000 USD. So the median loss for organizations that did not need to because their controls were already adequate, only $50,000. Reacting after the fact costs more than twice as much as acting before it. Prevention is not just ethically preferable, it's financially more efficient. If we look at our post-incident minimum standards that one would want to see in your organization as a minimum that you want to embed into your organization, and this is for an organization of any size, any organization. So when significant fraud does occur, At some point where it will, there's a minimum set of actions that you should follow every time, regardless of the size of your incident or the outcome of the investigation. Starting off by a formal root cause analysis that you document. Moving to a lessons learned session. It's conducted and it's minuted. The risk register that's updated and approved. And it's not flagged for later, at that point in time. Clear ownership of your remediation actions with timelines linked to the severity of the risk. Independent validation by internal audit that the remediation's actually been implemented. And then your oversight reporting to your audit committee or your equivalent governance body. These standards matter because they ensure the loop closes. The more the organization moves from reaction to learning, they create the institutional memory. And that means the next incident is less likely. And if it does occur, it's detected faster. Let's look at a practical example. So for example, a payroll fraud occurred. After this fraud, the response should not stop once the employee matter is finalized. The organization should revisit the access rights, the approval workflows, the exception reporting, payroll change logs, the manager review routines, and your independent assurance over the remediation. The lessons learned should also feed into your fraud awareness training so that the future red flags are easier for employees and managers to recognize. Summary, if you look at what does it mean for us in a South African context, we as South Africa arrived at a similar structure independently. So our national anti-corruption strategy for 2020 to 2030 was shaped in part by the Zondo Commission recommendations. It's built around our consolidated set of our strategic pillars that's spanning over prevention, procurement integrity, oversight, and consequence management. And the value of that structure is that it recognizes the interdependence. Procurement reform depends on governance reform. Governance reform depends on culture, and culture depends on consistent leadership and assurance. And the strongest improvements come when these elements are addressed together. Before we open the knowledge exchange session, please add any final questions that you have on how to connect prevention, detection, investigation, your response, and your assurance into one practical fraud risk management loop. And we will start by picking up the questions that already been submitted.
Thanks, Gert. Let's discuss what we've learned today. So we started off by very shocking statistics, about 5% of annual revenue that is as a result of fraud. But I've seen some very good comments in the section, in the chat, around how we can prevent fraud and some of the practical measures. So I'm very curious to maybe ask Surety to come online and just talk about her point on access controls. Surety, if that's all right with you? Wani, will you just unmute Surety for us? Is it possible for Surety to come online? For Wani?
Yes,
Okay,
we are unmuting them.
Thank you. Thank you. Surety, I thought your point around technology and access controls were very relevant, particularly if we look at today's day and age where technology is pervasive. So would you want to just contribute on that point?
Oh, yes, no problems. Thanks for the chance, Maria. So the reason why I speak about access control, right? I major in cybersecurity, so everything that the controls that they talked about today made sense. I've realized that humans are always the weakest link when it comes to security or fraud in this case, right? Especially when we do not have those whistleblower protections in place. People are always scared or they fear for their lives. Even when you're watching Madlanga Commission, there's someone who comes forward and the next minute they're gone, right? So I focus on the technical control side of things because I understand we are humans. We can be scared, we can be intimidated into speaking up, right, when we see something is wrong. So access controls, what I like about access controls, it allows for non-repudiation, meaning if someone logged into a particular system, performed a particular transaction, there's no way that they can claim that they were not that particular individual, right, who did that. So it eliminates that point where someone has to come forward, right, when it's there on the logs. So that's why I said access controls are much better, because it does eliminate that opportunity, right? You can see who actually performed that particular transaction on a particular system.
And it's a preventative control. So personally, I have also in my studied computer science, and I always look out for opportunities how organizations can use technology to enhance their control environment. And segregation of duties and access controls are some of those that are most of the powerful ones that one can implement. But somehow organizations in today's day and age still struggle with that. I'm sometimes surprised because, I studied these things. Now I'm giving my age away, but I studied these things in about the year 2000. And here we sit in 2026. And a lot of organizations still just struggle with that. I'm just curious if any of our participants has got a view on why it is so difficult to implement it and to keep it properly implemented. I would value anybody's insights on this topic. Maybe raise your hand or then we can give you a chance. Who wants to explore this one? Yes, surety.
I feel like the reason why companies are still struggling to implement this is that we are resistant to change, right? Change does not come easy, yes. Right? So that's the reason why it's difficult to implement such controls, because change takes time for most individuals, right? So if you can focus on change management where we can get the human element on board, I feel like these controls can actually work.
Yeah. Let's hear from some of the other participants in the session. I'm seeing some familiar names here, so I might call on you. As you know me, I typically do that. I don't know, Sayushka, any chance you want to contribute? I'm so happy to see some of our loyal supporters here today. Thank you very much. It's nice to connect again. Yunanda, thank you for joining us. And this is not me trying to buttering anybody up or prioritizing some people above others. I'm just quickly scrolling through the names. Kulwani Sayushka wants to contribute. Can you unmute her?
Hi, Ria.
Yes. Hey.
And thank you guys for such a useful session. This has been really good. I think from from what I can see, the resistance to maybe implementing certain things is also coming from a shortage of resources, and just trying to get, if I look at us as a fairly new organization and setting up a new finance function, there's so many different competing priorities that sometimes there's certain things that, fall lower down the priority list, unfortunately. It's not necessarily the right thing or the right way to prioritize, but because with the startup or setup phase of an organization, you're trying to get basics in place, considerations in terms of fraud and other aspects may fall lower down. So it's really a prioritization of resources in certain instances.
No, Sayushka, it's very true what you're saying. And what I've seen, and now, I've been on the other side of the fence always, an auditor, looking in, not being responsible for necessarily implementing it myself. But I see that sometimes organizations will put in a significant effort to establish the baseline, but then things change. And there's new people, processes change, and then somehow these access controls and principles that were put in place are not maintained, which is then sad, because then at some interval, one again needs to put in a lot of effort to almost clean up the environment. But I do think artificial intelligence should help us. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, in our organization, we're pushing, or leadership is pushing AI a lot to gain efficiencies. And that's not just, we're a tech company. So it's not just in the tech spaces, but also in our support type functions like HR and finance, etc. So that's coming in now. And I think it's certainly going to help with some of the more basic functions and checks that need to happen.
And then it's a responsible AI again, right?
Absolutely. Yes, there's that other aspect. The other thing I wanted to say, Ria, is so the one is around competing resources and priorities, but also what I'm seeing on the other side is that what brings in a different element into the mix is also around having different locations in different regions or countries. And that sometimes results in decentralized processes, especially in the finance environment where, there's different regulations and rules around finance and payments and taxes. So we find things happening differently in different areas and countries. And that, again, may leave some room for, error, for fraud, that if the right controls are not put in place centrally.
Yes. That's another dynamic to this challenge, right?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think the next point I want to explore that was highlighted in the chat was a very interesting question that was posed around the penalty in relation to fraud. Let me just get that question. Maybe Sanne-Marie, you've got it there. You can help me. Have you got it? Stronger penalties, yes. To propose prison sentences in the draft bill. I know you also wrote an article on the draft bill, right? Earlier in the year.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. What's your thoughts on that one, Sanne-Marie?
I think, from my perspective, and I think we've unpacked it quite a bit. It's twofold. We have the bill. I mean, in itself, that can help because it really sends that strong signal of the fact that retaliation is serious and it's unacceptable. We do see that, but again, when I think about it in the bigger perspective, that's where that fifth topic about ethics in the practical environment comes in for me, is that the penalties alone won't build the trust component. It's the fact that organizations still need a safe reporting channel or multiple mechanisms. It needs to be dealt with confidentially. There needs to be fair investigations, for example. That visible follow-through component is also important here. And a favorite of mine is the fact that the leadership behavior still needs to show the employees that they will be protected in practice. So that's my view. I don't know, Gert, if you want to add anything to that, but I really think, sure, I mean, the bill will work, but we need the human component as well.
Somebody spots on, you covered it very well. The details around that is, and that is, I think, the challenge that a lot of enterprises do face is, how can we make it practical in our organization? And I understand that a lot of organizations come to the table and say, but we rather want to focus on growing our business and not focusing on spending on functions such as support or fraud prevention or ethics and whistleblowing. And this is where they miss the point completely, because what you save in having these things in place, you cannot measure. It's beyond measure. It's priceless. So I just wanted to state that. We had a hand there.
Yeah, I'm so happy to see Flora has put up her hand, because she made a very profound comment in the chat. So let's unmute Flora and give her a chance. And I hope you're going to talk about what you wrote in the chat, Flora. Wani, did we unmute Flora? Laura, I think we...
Everyone.
Hi.
I've just unmuted myself on my
Oh,
side.
awesome. Thank you.
I just wanted to add my 2 cents as well to what we're discussing now. And I think another contributor to having these reoccurring fraud incidents is also maybe a lack of skill within organizations. So you may have processes that are defined, but in terms of implementing and doing the root cause analysis, getting the right inputs from the relevant people that need to be part and parcel of the process to change whatever chain broke and enabled the fraud to take place in the first place, there isn't adequate skill within organizations to make those changes effective. So yeah, that was just one thing that I noted just from what I've observed.
100% spot on. And please share your comment you put in the chat. I thought it was so profound.
It's based on experience, whereby we really, from a previous organization that I was part of, we had a very strong internal audit department. We raised really value-adding findings and recommendations. However, because of lack of support and conviction from the leadership, we found many instances of repeat findings and us having to, raise one and the same thing over and over again, just because, people didn't feel the need to implement what we were raising and recommending. And also it was enabled through just the leadership not acting
demonstrating
the way
their commitment.
Yes, demonstrating what needs to be actually happening on the ground. So yeah,
I must say that for me, tone at the top is so important.
yes.
And it's not what you document, it's what you done.
Yes.
And I sometimes I sit and observe people. And now that we are more working remotely, I don't observe people that often anymore. But it was so interesting when we were more in a physical environment working, how you can see people copy the behavior of other people. And you can literally see that the department head said A, B, and C. Now the next thing you hear the manager saying the same thing, which is obviously a good thing when it's all positive and constructive. But now if the leader is negative or criticizing a new policy or complaining about it, it does rub off on the rest of the team. And then that filters in the organization. And that is why, and it starts changing the culture. It influences the culture. Yunanda also made the comment she quoted the CEO of EOH around, let me just get the exact words, around ethics and culture beats strategy every day. Yeah. And I agree 100%, because the culture and almost the way the organization just work can let a lot of new practices or ideas just die, because there's just no drive to implement that. Our previous CEO, Victor Sekese, he always talked about the smell of the place. When he talked about culture, and he says, what is the smell of the place? Is this a place where we are proud, where we are take care of what we do? What is our day-to-day behavior? And I think that brings me to summarize our session for today, is actually to just reflect back on that statement from Thuli Manduzela, where she said, if you stand for nothing, you will fall for anything. And her comments around, what is your vision for your day? What is your own compass for how you operate? Are you just going to be silent? And even if you observe wrong behavior, if you observe wrong actions, or are you going to speak up? And I know it's difficult, right? It takes courage. It's very difficult to speak up. but it's important. And being in a role as an internal auditor or a risk professional, that responsibility is even more on us to not stay quiet and to speak up. And it's important that we challenge and question. And I also saw someone made the point around, but maybe someone is scared to speak up. And that is where the safe culture and the safe environment is so important, and confidentiality, and creating that environment so that people can speak up. Being a leader myself in SNG, it's always important for me to try and create an environment where my team members feel comfortable to speak up. Because sometimes they're just not sure and they want someone that they can test check something with. And Sanmarie also talked about having that champion in place, that somebody can reach out to say, I saw someone did A, B, and C today. Is that appropriate or isn't it? And that type of thing is so important, that we can have a confidential conversation with someone to just check, is this appropriate or isn't it? Or if it isn't, what should we do about it and how should we go about doing it? And then it also obviously linked back to training and awareness, which I know is close to Sanmarie's heart, around, making sure people know what to do, how to do it, where to do it, because it all works together in strengthening the environment, the control environment. I think we've had a fantastic audience today. Thank you very much for your participation and your comments in the chat. I enjoyed following it and responding to it. I want to ask you in closing a couple of things. Please scan our QR code or use the link in the chat and give us feedback on how the session has met your expectations. And also, please let us know in the chat any other topics you would still like us to explore as part of the SHEroes platform. We've been somewhat quiet this year so far, but we're back on track. I've had a tough year. I've been quite busy, but certainly SHEroes is getting more time from me, and you're going to see a lot more of us in the months to come. And hopefully we can continue with that momentum going forward again. But please don't get demoralized. Please keep following us. And we would like to hear from you on topics you would like us to discuss as well. So maybe put that in the chat. Follow us on LinkedIn, comment on LinkedIn, also engage with us via LinkedIn. And yeah, let's get your comments on the QR code, please. The recording for today's session will be made available towards the end of the week, and you will find that also. We will post it via the SHEroes platform on LinkedIn. And then if you then want to comment on that or even share it further with your colleagues or somebody else in your network, please feel free to do so. A big thank you to my team. Sanmarie, our SHEroes, thank you for all the preparation and for the valuable insights you provided for us today. And all SHEroes need a hero. So Gert, thank you for being our hero today and for all your contribution and helping us and the preparation, etc. And then for the team behind the scenes, who you might just have heard whispers from, Bawani, Mpo, Thelma, and I hope I'm not missing anyone out. Thank you for helping us getting this professionally done and all orchestrated for today. We really appreciate your support. And then for all our loyal supporters, it was awesome having you here today. Quite a few familiar names, so it was amazing to connect again. Have a wonderful rest of your week. And let's remember, if you stand for nothing, you will fall for anything. Cheers.